it's going to frame the collapse. Is that what you meant?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is a really important time for us to come together to co-create a language, co-create a map of this territory, and be aligned. So
what I love about PDA too is that it also makes it very clear that everything cannot be known. And so a part of the map has to be being with not knowing. Like,
exactly.
Right.
huge
Absolutely
to
right.
me,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Because,
Hi, Michael. Hi, Neela. Hi, Tom.
Well, thank you to all of you who have come a bit early. Thank you so much. It really helps us be able to get a good start. Good morning for me anyway.
It's actually something we could start with. Was going to invite people to check in the chat, just to say a line about. We don't have time for verbal check-in, especially if the group gets larger. So, if you could write a line in the chat about where you are and how you're feeling. Are you nervous, anxious, excited, numb, whatever? Oregon, Venezuela, Vermont, Santa Fe, Boston, Azores, London, Brighton, UK, Somerset.
I actually like this way of checking in. This is good.
Yeah, it's great for larger groups because we all get to sort of land in some way, but check-ins can get out of hand time-wise. Okay, should we start, Dean?
Absolutely. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome. And I'm just thrilled that we have so far 26 people here from the greater deep adaptation community. And my name is Dean Walker. And I'm very quickly going to just introduce the space and turn it over to Matthew Painton. And Matthew and I are both volunteer moderators on the Deep Adaptation Forum in what's called the Holistic Approaches and Guidance Group. And if you're unaware of that, please come visit. It's one of a number of subgroups in the Deep Adaptation Forum, and it's the one where people who are counselors or life coaches or facilitators of various kinds of personal growth work can come together to explore what is it to create this type of work with and for people in an atmosphere, in an environment, in a time like no other in human history. That's my assertion anyway, that what we're looking at in terms of a collapse-aware community, which is another way that I like to call us, these are extraordinary times. And so this particular get-together and the second one in the series, which is a couple of weeks from now, is something that Matthew and I put together as an addendum to a number of other interviews that we've done with thought leaders, people who have been really involved with the collapse-aware community or with providing very high-level service to people who have been activists for decades or involved with very large-scale concerns of one kind or another. For instance, folks who have been working with Joanna Macy in terms of their work that reconnects and also active hope. I will be putting links to all the previous interviews in the show notes when this is posted on the forum and on my own podcast and so on. what today is about and what 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks from now is about, is for us to come together and to create something of a common language, to start to create something of a common language for what is this deep adaptation work. What is it to be in this community? What is it to be in the collapse aware community? How do we speak about it? How do we map it out? Because it's new for all of us. It's so mysterious and so such highly pressurized motivations are bringing us all to this. You know, literally the fabric of our world is at stake. And so Matthew and I both been very active in trying to generate a new way to speak about this community and about this whole notion of deep adaptation. And Matthew in particular has put together a model of one of the first kind of formulations or maps of this territory. And none of this is meant to be the truth. We're not saying this is now the way we talk about it. We're just wanting to start this process because it seems to serve us all to have some map that we can start to use to be able to reference what is it that we're up against? What is it that, how can we talk about the various things that are most important to each of us? So with that amount of introduction, and thank you for those folks who have checked in, so to speak, in the chat. That's really what we have time for today, is so if you haven't yet checked in about where you're from and something about that you're willing to share about your checking in today, please continue to do that, and please continue to post questions or comments in the chat. You're welcome to use that liberally today. But right now, I'd like to turn over probably the rest of our time together to Matthew Painton, a life coach and remarkable contributor to the Deep Adaptation Forum. I can let him speak about that as much as he might like, but I just rest assured he is someone who's contributed mightily to the deep adaptation world and through the forum. So Matthew, would you welcome the folks and introduce yourself and introduce us to what this is about from your perspective?
Thanks, Dean. Thank you all for coming. And I really mean that sincerely, that these spaces are essential, these where we come together and something's happening on Earth. We're calling it collapse at the moment. And it's to acknowledge that personally, each of us has a very narrow interface with what that thing is. And it varies according to class, gender, race, cultural background, and geographical location. Some of us are much closer to the symptoms of this event, this global event, than others. So it appears very differently. We notice especially in the chat threads, there are many different processes and skills and ambitions and perspectives within this space. So Dean and I have been concerned with sort of developing a language that accommodates all perspectives and invites the different skill sets that we need to navigate this space. Dean and I are sort of talking about foundational skills, which is circling and co-regulation of our emotions and things like that. I'll talk about that more in a bit. And then transformational level skills, which we'll talk in the next workshop. So yeah, so all these different perspectives, all this different language, how do we language it and find a common way of speaking? That's what the workshop's about. And to sort of acknowledge and to share something of your deep adaptation. So there'll be 3 breakout groups. After the first breakout group, I'll show the model and sort of talk us around it for 10 minutes. And then the 2 other breakout groups will speak about the model. Each of the breakout groups will be the same format. They'll last 16 minutes. Groups of 3 will arrive, and I invite you to take 3 deep breaths together. And then each person will speak for 4 minutes. Speak unguardedly, don't rehearse what you have to say, it's not being recorded. And then 3 minutes at the end for the group to acknowledge what's been said. And the thing to do there is to acknowledge, don't try to fix, don't try to advise or point to resources. Just say what you've heard and if it's how it's moved you. Okay, so we'll go to the first breakout group, which is, and we invite you to speak to, how did I become collapse aware? What got me through? And what are the benefits of deep adaptation so far? So how did I become collapse aware? What got me through? And what are the benefits of deep adaptation so far?
Okay, so Matthew, are we ready to go?
Yep.
All righty.
Oh, just to say, when we come back, we'll, if a spokesperson from each group just says something about what was said, not a report of the whole conversation, but a pearl or a nugget from each group.
Okay, so we're going to be gone for about 15, 16 minutes, and I'll be sending out broadcasting the amount of minutes that have gone by, the amount of minutes remaining, so you can manage your own participation with those updates. All right, I'm just sending out a message to everybody that the first 5 minutes is done. So Matthew, would you like to share about these questions, your responses?
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak about this again in the group, but for me, it started with a period of intense anxiety. I mean, I've never been invested in the mainstream. From very early on in my life, I thought, well, that's not going to last. This is unsustainable. So I've kind of always been alternative and outside the mainstream. But yeah, about 3 years ago, I just hit my nervous system, my spine erupted in anxiety. And it was, some days it was really debilitating. All I could do was sit with anxiety. And then I sort of read Jem's paper, and wow, there's a community of people that, you know, are beginning to see this the way I fear, if you like, and that's been great to. And meanwhile, my coaching, you know, I was coaching people to be more successful in a world I no longer believed in, and there was, you know, a lot of truth and value in that, but the heart had dropped out of it for me. So it's been great to meet Dean and Stina and other people in the network and sort of reformulate coaching. Yeah. So the what got me through that was learning to grieve. I went to an extraordinary grief workshop, a whole weekend grief workshop, where we built altars, we shared our grief, and did a ritual through the whole night with drumming and singing and taking it in turns to go to the grief altar and really let go with our grief. That was an extraordinary event and really helped me to sort of the anxiety really diminished after that. So for me, there was a really clear connection with being able to grieve and anxiety, and you know, all those places in feeling that we don't want to go. Yeah. So the benefits of deep adaptation have been really, really deep connections with people, relationships that, you know, Dean and I meet every so often and chew the fat, for example, and deep things happen for me, you know, when we really go to the edge of the conversation, and that nourishes me and keeps me going, and to some extent, then, you know, there's an element of exhilaration in this as well. At times, you know, this is an extraordinary time to be alive, and there's a sort of a quickening and awakening that can happen. I don't know if you saw Beth. Was it Beth Ozarko?
Deb Ozarko.
Deb Ozarko. She spoke to this sort of awakening and exhilaration in a really powerful way, which is present to the darkness, present to the grief, present to the collapse, but brings a quickening, to use an old-fashioned word.
Well, I'm going to see what I can do to answer some of these prompts. How did collapse enter into my awareness? It entered into my awareness when I was about 9 years old, and I would watch the television specials of Jacques Cousteau. And those television specials made it very clear to me that there was no way that this could continue, because he would point out not only the beauty under the water, but also the damage that we were doing. And when I would turn away from the TV, I saw that there was nobody, none of the adults around me listened to that, planned on doing anything about that, and they haven't. And while I've had some time, quite a bit of time in personal development and a remarkable connection with the earth in that time, mostly I sold out to having a wonderful job, doing wonderful things with wonderful people around the world, and making a decent living doing it, and being fully aware that I was not doing anything to help the situation. And by flying around and doing this work and working particularly with corporations, I was making it worse. And I just had to live with that cognitive dissonance. Then about 10 years ago, I started to get the first few messages of how things were going much worse than I had ever thought, at a much faster rate than I ever thought. And so for the past roughly 8 years, I've been very, very active and in having a very different presence in myself about our world. Out of that, I wrote a book about that process, and I am very involved with, well, really this kind of work is what I do. And deep adaptation is just one small part of it. And so it's been a joy to meet other people. Well, if you're coming here for the deep adaptation meeting, you are here, and you're just catching us in the first of 3 breakout rooms, breakout sessions. You're certainly welcome. We're about to finish up, but you have come just at the right time to hear what Matthew will be speaking about in about a minute. Actually, I'll be closing down the rooms in about a minute. So I'm going to click that button right now.
Okay.
There'll be some awkward silence, and then there will be a quick shift to where everyone will show up on the screen in about a minute.
Okay. Okay, well, this is in the middle of my workday, so I can't stay, but I will stay for this part until the next breakout. That would be great if that's okay.
Of course, that's okay. Thanks for being here.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And hi, Tim. Good to see you.
Oh, good to see you. Good to see you.
So welcome back, everyone. Okay, so if things have worked well, maybe somebody from each group might like to sort of just popcorn something that was said or appreciated in each of the groups.
Actually, what I think we have time for is if there are 3 or 4 people total from any group who have something that just really moved you, really was somehow impressed on you from that breakout group, you could briefly share about that. That would be wonderful. Yeah, Alain, looks like.
Okay, I heard my name first, so
Yeah.
I'll go.
Yeah.
One of the things that came up in our group, and we noticed this just by looking at books on shelves in the background, was that all 3 people in my group have an interest in indigenous thinking and ideas like rewilding and that sort of thing. And so that forms kind of a thread of investigation for us as we think and lean into the idea of deep adaptation.
Thank you. Alain, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you. What we ended up with in the group is wondering, what's the role of in terms of being action-minded, what's the role of trauma healing, both individual and collective trauma healing, so that we can address what is happening now, which actually activates all the traumas, individual and collective traumas. And how do we address this? And this is definitely in groups, not individually only. And to what extent will it help us overcome this deep separation instinct that we have, and this domination instinct also that we have, one vis-a-vis the other and over nature, etc. So that was one of the things that we discussed.
Very good, thank you. And before we get too much further, both Eric and Alana, if you would be kind enough to just post a notation of what the essence of what you've just shared in the chat, it would be greatly appreciated. I'd hate to lose any of these lovely shares, so thank you for that. Perhaps time for 1 or 2 more.
Jessica had a hand up.
I was going to speak to the thing I think that came out the most for me was when my partner talked about having depression as a young adult and realizing, no, it's not me, it's a shitty system. And so that, to me, very much speaks to what Ellen just brought up, which is kind of number 1 in my world. Thank you.
Okay.
And Matthew, I'm going to give it to you, whatever the timing is before you want to get going in the next part. There are some other folks with their hands up, but I'll leave it to you to establish the timing for the shift.
Getting a sense of, I've lost track of the time a bit, but I'm getting a sense that I'd like to move on if that's okay. Unless anyone's really burning with something. Okay, so Dean, can you share the model on
Yes.
share screen? Great.
I will.
So I'm just going to spend 10 minutes or so sort of talking us around this. My deep adaptation started, I was just sharing that about 3 years ago, when my nervous system erupted into anxiety, very debilitating anxiety. some days I couldn't get out of bed, and all I could do was sit with that anxiety. I went to a grief workshop, and I was able to express my grief for what I was perceiving in the world. And after that, my anxiety diminished. And then I found deep adaptation, and I've been working with folk like Dean and Stina to bring offerings into this space that work for people. And I've had a lot of conversations across the network with different people, and I started to perceive patterns of responses and perspectives. And especially in the chat and Facebook, some flashpoints of conflict and disagreement around different perspectives. And I was playing around with what are all possible perspectives, and what are the skill sets that need to be developed in this space. And I started to play around with the mandala, and it's had many different iterations. And it really popped when I brought in the elements. And if we're talking about sort of indigenous wisdom, there's the 5 elements: earth, air, fire, and water, spirit, has arisen in the East, in the Chinese tradition, and in the West. And it's a deep wisdom, but it's a folk wisdom as well that is very present and accessible. So thinking about it in terms of the 5 elements, that came up with this mandala, and it's interesting to talk about them in pairs, introduce them in pairs. If we start with acceptance, which is feelings and water, this is where we let go. This is where we calibrate ourselves, our internal being, with what is, and it's a feeling process. We let go of how things ought to be, how they could be, how they might have been, the future we were expecting to have, of species, of certainty, and all of that is deeply felt. And as we learn to grieve and feel for that loss, the flip side of that is gratitude, which is also a feeling. We can only grieve for what we love. So in being present to grief, we can also become present to love. So this is about flow, feeling, water, letting go. And then opposite that, we've got a really different zone, which is the heart space of resistance. And here we sort of discover what we will not let go of, what we cannot let go of, what it's not worth living without. And these are our values: truth, justice. So in this zone, you ignite with a passion for values, and we're seeing these eruptions of resistance with Black Lives Matter and Occupy and Arab Spring, where people become inflamed with these values. And with that, we can shine a light into the shadow, resist the negative changes that are threatening to overwhelm us, and make a stand to direct change from these values. So you can see that there are different skill sets, different processes within the deep adaptation space. And it's easy to understand how somebody standing in one may misunderstand somebody standing in the other. And this is the stuff that we have to just do. We all have to do some of these skills in each of these zones. So the next set is engagement and understanding, earth and air, body and mind. In engagement, and this is what Eric perhaps was mentioning, the living skills. It's where we roll up our sleeves and get pitched in. It's material resources. It's our body. It's survival. It's preparing the soil. It's finding food, preparing the soil, seeding the future, and working to build material resilience. Opposite that, we have understanding, mind and air. How do we make sense of all this? We know that the information ecosystem is being highly polluted with engines of misinformation, disinformation. And even where we have good information, we don't know how to interpret it. It's uncertainty, dissonance arising, and it's really hard to make sense in that background. So again, we come together, we circle and start to make sense of things with the mind. And then in the center is the spirit of wisdom, the zone of wisdom and spirit, ether, integration and transcendence. This is about connecting with all that I am. And in the scientific zone, in the zone of understanding, we're told, science has only just revealed this vast, interconnected, evolving, structured universe. And the universe isn't broken. It's still evolving. And the Earth, in deep time, we see that the biosphere blossoms, flowers, and collapses, and re-blossoms, the Cretaceous, the Jurassic, in these great ages. And civilizations rise and fall. And it's a process of expansion and contraction. So how do we connect with that? This is another skill set. How do we resource ourselves from the unbroken places so that we can be present to what is broken and offer healing, offer support, offer insight to the groups that we're part of? So we all have to go through all of that. We've all got all of that going on in us as individuals and in collectives. I mentioned XR and Black Lives Matters. We've got permaculture in engagement, and deep adaptation seems to sort of sit very well in the understanding, transcendence, and acceptance zone. So that's probably enough for now. So the next breakout group, we invite you to choose one of the frames and speak of your deep adaptation from there. Choose the frame in which your deep adaptation is going well, where you feel resourced, where you feel processed, where you have skills. And just speak about that zone to the other people. And it's the same format, the same amount of time. And then we'll come back together and share. So when we're ready, Dean, we can go to the next breakout.
Very good. Thank you. I'll be right there. All right. Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate your being first and just stepping right into it. Tim, are you up for sharing anything about how you're connected with any aspect of either deep adaptation or what caught your eye about what Matthew was sharing in the model, and basically what's showing up in terms of positive resources for you out of
sure.
out of either of those. There we go.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting model. Yeah, because there's definitely the four aspects, and um, Marina, I really liked your example of the heart one, because that side, because I've been, I guess I'll just keep going.
Must
Yeah,
be me.
the heart stuff.
If you can hear each other, you go. You go.
Okay. Yeah, because I've been involved with XR, and resistance, or, well, I mean, the R in the name rebellion, kind of catalyzes it or summarizes it fairly well, because it's even more than resistance in a sense, and that's kind of the whole point of that. But that's been interesting, and certainly that side of it. I liked your example though, because it's a more heart level resistance versus more of a action oriented or external, or you know what I mean, kind of, and also more intellectual is the other thing I've noticed. Because in the thing I liked about the model, yeah, actually, I personally, I do pretty well, and I do like the the feelings, mind, body, heart thing. That's not a bad way to split it up, if you're going to split it up into four like that. And you know how it is. It's like models are one thing, but certainly there are those four aspects. And pairing with elements is interesting too, if you're into that sort of stuff from like a Buddhist perspective, because their elements refer to the four elements, not the 100 and something in the periodic table. And so that aspect, like the feelings in the water, is really good, because have done a lot of work on the grief side of this stuff over the years. When really getting into near-term human extinction stuff the first time was just overwhelming. It was just, and I'd lost parents, I'd lost kids, I'd lost dogs, and that was the grief cycle about losing the future for everyone forever. Amen. Which, was pretty amazing. The mind air one I like too. In that one, for an even more oblique Tibetan reason. In that form of Buddhism, part of it is mind, and mind is, I'd have to explain a whole bunch of stuff. It's a big deal in Tibetan Buddhism. It's sort of in the very center of the conversation, if you will. But the practice aspect is, the practice is referred to as riding the wind horse. And the wind is the breath, and the breath is thought of as, the simplest way to put it is, the body, which is the one opposite it, knows how to breathe. You don't have to tell it. You don't have to manage it. It just knows. And if you sit still on the cushion, it knows quite nicely how to breathe, and then your mind can just go wandering off wherever it goes. Yeah, I thought that was an interesting pairing, because there really, I think sometimes there's some insight, into that that's maybe just a touch less than obvious. You know what I mean? And you look through this stuff, how it is. Grief is not a linear process. That's one thing about acceptance and letting go, is in layers and layers and layers of that. Because you have to keep doing it. Every day is a new day. You got to keep, a week from now, next Tuesday, I'll have to let go that day. Maybe I'll stop there.
Jim, thank you. It's interesting. When I look at specifically deep adaptation, and for instance, the 4 R's that they put at the center of it, it's actually not been tremendously useful for me as a model, as a set of spurring questions. But what's been incredibly valuable for me is to, hello there, Gary. Has been the community, has been the ability to meet so many different people in different places. And Gary, hi, you've just come into, okay. Hi there, Gary. You've just come into a breakout room, kind of midstream in this hour-and-a-half long session, and you're totally welcome. It's just my turn of the three of us to share, and we have about 4 minutes left in this breakout session. We're going to go back briefly to the whole group, hear a little bit more about how people are doing and sharing and so on, and get a little bit more about this particular theme or model that Matthew Painton has been talking about. If it's any reassurance at all, this whole thing will be recorded and posted, so you won't have missed a thing after that. And again, welcome. What I was saying was that it isn't so much the form of or the words of deep adaptation, but to be with kindred spirits who, to me, what makes us kindred is that we are seeing that one way or another, we're in collapse. We're in human-caused collapse of Earth and human systems. And that's the work that I do. And it is so reassuring to be able to come together with other people and not have to worry about arguing about it or debating about it, but instead having an open invitation for each person to share what's their reality. Because yours may be very different than mine, but what we seem to come together in is a way of shifting ourselves in light of the most important conversation in the history of humankind. And so that's what I feel well resourced in. That's what I find really valuable here. It has been a real pleasure to be able to engage in these conversations with people who've been in this work, this kind of personal growth work for a long time, and then engage in the conversation of what will it take to come together in a good way in these times that are so polarized, at least here in the States. They're so polarized, they're so insane. On top of the environmental and economic and justice issues that are going on. It's an extraordinary time. So I feel it's a real gift to be a part of this community and find safe places to have these conversations. I'm going to hit the return to the main room button, which gives us a minute. Thank you both so much for your sharing. And Gary, I'm sorry you came in kind of midstream, but it sounds like you can still catch some of it today, and of course the recording as well.
Can we continue to share, or?
Sorry?
Can we continue to share, or are we going back to the big group?
We are in the big group, just not everybody else is back. You're welcome to say what you'd like. It's an open floor.
Okay. Three of my grandparents fled Nazi Germany, and I can't talk to my parents about what's going on. I think it's too upsetting to them.
Yeah.
So a couple of people have mentioned trauma. So maybe we could speak to that in the second workshop. Are we all back? Yes, we are.
I think so.
So once again, if how are we doing for time? We have another breakout group. Yeah, if anybody has anything they want to offer from their group, we'd love to hear it.
And you're also welcome to just type straight into the chat so we can keep track of it. And for those who don't know this, you can click over in the chat in the three dots area to get a copy of the chat from this from this session. So if we could have perhaps 2 or 3 people share what was moving for you in this last breakout group.
I think, Michael, did you?
Thank you, Matthew. Yes, I just wanted to say how the last session I found incredibly useful, as indeed the one before that. And in particular, learning from what Jerry and what Mandy were talking about. And what I wanted to feedback, I think, Matthew, was just a thought on the mandala. You know, Jerry made, I thought, a very wise point that whichever parts of the mandala you have an interest in may relate to where you are in your life's journey. And the other thing was, for all of us, we wanted to talk about nature. And really, just for my understanding of your model, is nature really sort of fire and earth on the left, if I remember? Is that where nature is, or is nature everywhere?
Yeah, I think nature's everywhere. It's in you know, these are elemental images that we're using, and there's nothing but nature in one sense, and we interface with nature through our understanding, through our emotions, through our so it's in every zone, I'd say. Yeah. Anything else to say, or should we?
I'd like to make an observation. One of the things that I noticed, and this is obviously my interpretation, is that it is focused on the I, connecting with all that I am. And I think it's very, so it's individually centered. And I would challenge that as a fundamental assumption. I think it's a very Western notion of the separation of the individual from the collective. And I know that you've tried to presence that in some way with the line at the bottom, but it seems to me there's something much deeper and fuller that needs to be explored.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I could change that to we are, or connecting to all that we are. Yeah. And it reminds me to say something that one of the best possible outcomes of this would be if people would move to go away and draw their own mandala and language it with your language, and explore your deep adaptation and the different impulses in your experience. That would be wonderful. So thank you. Yeah, there's many different ways to language this, but you have a point. We are. Let's connect with all that we are.
Diana, I have a request of you. If you would, if you could put the essence of what you've just said into the chat, it would be easy for many folks to be able to remember your wonderful point. Thank you so much for that sharing.
So time's coming slightly adrift. So if we're ready, we could go into the third and final breakout room.
Okay. Do you want to set it up?
Yeah, and in this one, again, using the mandala to choose one of the elements in which you feel vulnerable, or where there's nothing going on for you, or you're avoidant. So speak for a few moments about where your deep adaptation is not going well, where you feel stuck, or where you need the support of others, or to upskill. And yeah, choose one element if you can, or one or two, and speak about what's not going well.
Are we ready to go, Matthew?
Yep.
Alrighty. It'll be run the same way as the other couple of breakout rooms. A total of approximately 15 minutes. I'll keep you posted with the announcements about the time. And there may be just a little bit of shifting around of personnel in the beginning here as we have a couple of new members. So be ready for surprises in your group, possibly. And I'll get us going. So Gary, I don't know if you got a chance to see the image on the screen before Matthew sent us out to the rooms. Did that make any sense, what he was pointing at?
Yeah, I saw the image. I recognized the image from the information page
Okay.
on the forum website, but I haven't been part of the first couple of breakouts or the flow of intention here.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to share, and it sounds like Tim might be as well. We each have a few minutes that we. What really matters is not so much directly off the image, off of his model, which, if you can remember the piece, great. It's more what are areas of your own experience of our world right now where you don't feel so well resourced, that you feel some uncertainty, you feel like you could use some more experience or deep dive into a particular aspect. And so Tim, if you have some clarity for yourself, perhaps you could just respond, or if you'd like, I'm happy to start out.
Sure, go ahead, Dee.
Okay. Well, what I can say about where I feel most vulnerable, least resourced, is right now, it's very, very current to me about resistance, the energy of resistance that Matthew represents, of course, in the fire area of his model. And while I'm very clear what it is to be an activist and to be active in the world, I never dreamt that I would see a world like we're seeing now. So when I'm talking about my own experience and what I feel most comfortable and well-resourced and well-founded, grounded in, I would say that I feel least resourced right now in how to really stay true to my core experience, as opposed to what I've been taught or what I've been told is a good person thing to do, or nonviolence is always the best way to go, or this is what life is all about. I feel major gaps in all of those areas right now, because there are pieces of what's going on this planet that seems to humble all of those lessons, those life lessons that I learned so early and have been carrying along in my good boy role, or in my passionate but always nonviolent activist role. So right now I'm feeling a lot of vulnerability in that there are times when I have rage, like a white hot rage about what's going on in this planet, the end of humanity, the end of so many species every day, and so on. So I'm not saying that I'm ready to go out and do violence right this moment, but I am saying I feel very vulnerable and really torn open in this particular area with so much uncertainty and unclear. So that's what I would do to share a place that's open and vulnerable for me. That's more or less the end of my time. Tim, if you'd like to go now, you're welcome to, or Gary, if you feel ready to share whatever is going on for you that way, you're welcome to.
Sure, I could go ahead and hop in, I guess. Yeah, and maybe riff a little bit on what you're saying, Ian, because I was thinking about where you're most vulnerable is actually an interesting question. Where do you where's things least together? One piece of it for sure, yeah, is on the resistance side, and kind of the question of how to resist in a COVID world, and what does this look like, and what's the most urgent thing to resist, and And that part too is just mind blowing, because it's just, you know, the insanity is now morphing into exponential rate, which, if you think about it, it truly indicates how getting near the collapse we are, you know, because it's just mind boggling, you know, just how the acceleration effect and the acceleration of the insanity. And given that context, trying to figure out what does it mean to resist or respond or any of that, you know, at a collective level or an individual level. I mean, that was a good discussion, I thought, too, about, you know, this whole model, both individually and collectively. And I think it's one of those things, it's not dualistic in the sense that there's a good and a bad, so it's an either one or the other. I think it's an and deal, you know. There's both sides of the coin, and so there's, you know, that whole thing. But yeah, that's definitely one of them. You know, the other one that popped in my head was, I guess it's over on the body. It's really kind of engagement. It's the whole thing of, you know, to put it one way, it's like if I didn't have a job and didn't have family and didn't have constraints and all this sort of stuff, the same thing to do, the actual same thing to do right now is to go run for the hills and hide and go become a hermit in a little cabin somewhere or a cave or whatever it is. But just, you know what I mean? Because it's like, it just spend what time you then have, you know, because obviously each of us individually will die. So whatever time I would have left, being with nature is the punchline on that. And just, you know, and I think Dara could relate to this. It's like, if I have to be in the quote real world 4 hours a day, okay, I'll try and deal with 4, but I'm going to try and turn it down to 3. And when I get it down to 3, I'm going to try and turn it down to 2. And, you know, just kind of a radical thought, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, if you were really sane, that's what you'd do. And how insane the world is how everybody does exactly the opposite. Let me leave that there.
Thank you. Gary, anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, sure. You know, I guess the timing of this meeting and my personal schedule is not really advantageous. I'm split between, you know, this being interested in this process and being involved in a medical process as well. So I'm in a public place. I'm in a quiet corner of a public place for the moment. But when this question was asked, when we were invited to contemplate this issue of vulnerability in regard to the mandala that I saw, I noticed a couple of things. First of all, I'm far too easily inclined into the territory of understanding, and it's something you know, that's easy for me. And I could, you know, be drawing observations and conclusions about everything around me, the way that you have, Dean. And, you know, all of the same kind of feelings arise. And my alternative to that, lately, at least, has been to explore emergence a little more deeply and deliberately. And what that comes to mean for me is, it takes me out of understanding, first of all. And I frankly can't really say whether it takes me into resistance or out of resistance. But when I say, you know, let's say exploring emergence in terms of my personal life and physiology and in consciousness. It means a very, very deliberate and profound slowing down. And it's in that process of exploring what that really means for me in terms of, you know, whatever concept I have about emergence, whatever we think we mean by the word emergence, it takes me into a place in which my personal boundaries soften and perhaps for moments at a time even collapse a little bit. And that feels like actual refuge. But it's very precarious, and maybe it is a place of vulnerability because, you know, and I don't imagine too many other people would necessarily welcome, you know, a sense of a dissolution like that. And yet it feels like a sanctuary in which I get to experience myself deeply nested in a flowing process that is never ending. And it brings me up very close and personal with the sense of resistance, you know, because there is definitely a drive within me that wants to make that expression, to be visible in that expression. And at the same time, my personal circumstances do not lend me to that possibility. So, and what was the other quadrant? There was resistance, there was understanding, there was acceptance, and what?
And I think the quadrant you're asking about is engagement.
Say again?
Engagement.
Engagement, right. Frankly, dropping into emergence feels like a form of engagement.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, it maybe for me, it feels like about the deepest way of engaging that I've ever contemplated.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, it expresses, you know, it heightens the polarity between engagement and resistance. And, you know, I find that question just continues to come up, even though, as I've said, my personal circumstances really don't lend themselves for me to be out there in a visible way, you know, in active resistance.
Mm.
So I am seeking refuge in emergence at that level of being that is way, way slower than everything that's going on around us. It's intrinsic to everything. And it's where I can connect to everything and also be everything and be affected by everything. That's
Gary,
all I
thank you so
can say.
much for diving in so deep, and I just I'm very moved by what you're sharing. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Gary. That was awesome. That was well said.
Not bad for a guy in a hospital. I don't know where you are, but if it's a staircase or what.
Well, you know, the events going on outside, the events going on in the world are not the only things that are driving me back into emergence.
Yeah.
So I think we're all back. We've overshot on the time a bit more. I was hoping for sort of 15 minutes for this last part. Looks like we've got about 6 minutes. Dean, I think you had a couple of questions to ask the sort of wider group.
Well, actually, Matthew, if you feel free to, you know, draw some sort of completion out of that last segment in any way you'd like toward the model. And I would just like to apologize in advance for our going over. I completely understand if people need to be leaving at the bottom of the hour. And I apologize. We will be going over at least 5 minutes or so. So I hope you'll accept our apologies. And for those of you who would like to, there's going to be a recording posted, and that will be posted. We'll let everybody know on the Deep Adaptation Forum, the Positive Deep Adaptation Facebook group, and elsewhere. So, Matthew, would you like to kind of put a bow on it in terms of that last breakout, or anything you'd like to say in terms of this introduction to the model?
I'm very grateful for this time that everybody's sort of contributed and spoken well. I hope it was useful. I'd be interested to hear if anyone's likely to re-language it or draw their own mandala, or what was useful for you. I'm always re-languaging it, and if anyone has any insight, I'd be very interested.
Just a reminder, please, if you have anything that you would like to share from this last breakout group or any time during this this session, please post it in the chat, and we will be reading it and integrating it. And we're so excited for the second round of this in about 2 weeks. We hope you will join us for that as well. But Matthew, did you want to choose a couple folks, or?
I just noticed in the chat, Tim said to investigate the model at both the individual and the group. I'm glad you find that interesting. I find that very interesting too. That we've all got these different impulses going on inside ourselves and different skill sets, but also that how they emerge at the collective level and how different groups focus on different aspects of deep adaptation. That's a really interesting topic. Did anyone want to chip in with anything?
I'm Jessica. I just wanted to say that the model really came alive for me when you talked us through it. I had, looked at it before, and I'm even a visual person, but it wasn't until you spoke about it and I went, oh, yes, okay, yes. So I just wanted to offer that for what it's worth.
And Barbara, did you have something you wanted to share?
Yeah, I finally found where I have to raise my hand, but thank you. Yeah, we in our group, we shared that basically, or we agreed that of course you have areas where you're stronger, and then there are others that you can still work on, yet it felt like if you are in community with others, then it's okay to have a strength here and be focused on and then through the community, you have others that have strength in another area. And it feels like that's a sort of a relief, at least for me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Barbara. Matthew, with your permission, could I do a little bridge to the next session?
Please do, yes.
All right.
Thank you.
So I'm really excited about the number of people who've come to this, and that we have 2 sessions. This was intended to be a session where we could talk about what we've now come to call the foundation level of entering the collapse-aware community, or the deep adaptation community, if you will. And what we've been looking at together is what are some of the strengths we found in this level, in this entry level of the community, and what are some of the places where we still feel like we need more growth or more reinforcement or more depth. And what 2 weeks from now is about is meant to be something that Matthew and I and others have seen time and again, is that there's some number of people, of course, there's some number of people who will just be very, very happy to find a good circle and good elements here in this foundational level, in this kind of entry level. And it's much needed, and it's extraordinarily important that people have these safe spaces with each other to hold one another in these extraordinary times. There are also some number of people who find that there is another dimension to go, another step to go, and perhaps many more, but just for ease of conversation. And we, as Matthew mentioned at the beginning, we've been calling that the transformative level. And you mentioned, Matthew, Deb Ozarko was an interview that I've done in my podcast. Jim Bendel has spoken with her in his series. And perhaps you might want to pick up her book, Beyond Hope, as an extraordinary expression of someone who has chosen a path that clearly goes beyond this entry level, that it's work. It's an extraordinary step beyond in terms of personal growth work and engagement of the psycho-spiritual elements of our world and so on. And so we hope you will join us in the second session in this series in 2 weeks, same time, same Zoom information and so on, where we will be using the same model, but Matthew's developed a number of ways, number of frames for them within that model. And we'll be using that to spark conversation. And we're hoping that you will bring your conspire with us to build language for that level as well. What spiritual practices, what deep inner work, what shadow work, and so on. Someone mentioned a number of times trauma healing, which can, of course, happen in this level, but really is far more palpable and approachable at that level of the transformative level that we're going to be talking about in 2 weeks. So we need your help to start to gather together a language and a way to map out not only this level that we've been talking about today, but also that transformative level. And I'll tell you just personally, that lights me up. I cannot wait for that conversation and to hear your sharing what's been valuable for you and your practices in your life as we are all now facing these extraordinary challenges. Matthew, anything to wrap up for you?
No, you said it so well, Dean. I too am very excited about the next conversation, and feel very heartened, very blessed to share this space with everyone. I'm glowing, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you to every one of you for spending your time and energy and attention on yet another Zoom call. This is an important time. We'll be talking next time about how recent events have actually kind of pushed this conversation right up to the forefront. So I just so appreciate every one of you bringing your experience, your wisdom, your way of mapping and talking about these things. Thank you very, very much. And feel free to unmute yourself and put on gallery view and get one last minute view of each other. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Guys.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Aloha.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Eveline.
Thank you. Just
yeah.